So that was an example of kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is energy that is energy like in motion. This is an example because Megan exerted kinetic energy when she threw the snowflake onto the tree, and then the snowflake fell down. This is an example of potential gravitational energy because the snowflake is just hanging here and energy is being stored, but it's also being pulled down by gravity. This is an example of gravitation or of elastic potential energy because Megan had to stretch out the string for it to be able to fit around the Christmas tree. And elastic energy is potential energy where it's being pulled.
This is an example of motion because motion is the rate of change. And this is an example because Doug is walking from the couch to the Christmas tree.
Oh, Megan! Megan is using an example of speed because speed is a scalar quantity of how fast an object is moving. This is an example of it because Megan is running from the hallway or from the kitchen all the way to the couch. Hey, I think I should turn on the light over here.
Velocity is rate at which an object changes its position, and that's an example because Doug turned on the light and changed its position.
Megan, you need to turn this down! This is an example of acceleration because I sped up to turn down the volume of the stereo. I sped up and ran from the kitchen because acceleration is where you increase your rate of change. This is an example of Newton's first law of motion where an object in motion tends to stay at motion or an object in rest tends to stay at rest unless being blocked by another force. This is an example of it because when I failed to block the soccer ball kept rolling until it ran into the door. Hey, what's up, Megan? This is an example of Newton's second law, and Newton's second law is an acceleration of an object depends upon its mass of the applied force. This is an example of the Newton's second law because when I sat down, my mass was larger than Megan's and sent her flying. This is an example of gravity because gravity is a force that pulls objects down. This is an example of gravity because Megan dropped the ball and the pillow and they fell down. Stop, lose it, think fast. This is an example of force because force is where you exert mass on an object, and I exerted force when I threw the ball at Megan.
This is an example of balanced force because the rock is exerting a force on Doug and his foot is exerting a force on the rock. And nothing's happening. What are you doing?
I'm practicing my modeling.
Get off there.
This is an example of an unbalanced force because Megan's force exerted on me was stronger than my force against her. And an unbalanced force is where one force overpowers the other. This is an example of friction because Megan is exerting a force on the chalk, and the chalk is exerting a force on my door, and the door is trying to resist the chalk because friction is where two forces combine and they're resisting each other.
Oh God, Mark.
This is an example of Newton's third law of motion because that it states that every object that exerts a force has a force being acted upon against it. And when Megan jumped on the bed pushed up against her.